Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
And welcome into the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitta. Thanks for being with us today. On this edition of our program, we get together each week to talk about issues facing Cape Cod, the islands, and all of southeastern Massachusetts. And today we are on the road as we bring you the Sunday Journal from Provincetown at the Province Lands Visitor Center. And I'd like to thank the Superintendent of the Cape Cod National Seashore, George Price, for inviting me up to Provincetown today and into the Visitor Center. George, good to see you as always.
Matt, it's good to see you. I'm glad you made it up on this pretty day.
It's a beautiful day as we sit here. And we wanted to spend some time today up in Provincetown as we come to you here from mid to late May talking about a lot of the erosion that happened over the winter. And we did a story just recently on the federal money that's been approved for the repairs at Nauset Light Beach here in Provincetown. And we thought it'd be a nice opportunity to come up and see what's happening here firsthand. So first of all, let's go back a little bit and give us a bit of an overview of exactly the real type of destruction you saw up here during what was just a brutal winter.
Well, it was a pretty tough winter, Matt, and as you know, we've had a couple of problems with park facilities over the last couple of years. So Nauset Light Beach stairs have been lost. This is the third year in a row, and a lot of damage at the Heron Cove North parking lot here in Provincetown. So those are topics that not only were they damaged this particular winter, but that's been recurring issues the last few seasons. We're fortunate enough to receive emergency funding from our regional office, so we're in the process of moving ahead with a contract for the replacement of the Nauset Light Beach stairs. That will be happening hopefully by the first week in June. So it won't be open for Memorial Day, but hopefully soon into June we'll be able to do that. And we're in the process now of getting a contractor on board for the Heron Cove North parking lot. So there's no time date that's actually been set for that. Some of the other damage that we've had around the seashore has been some roof damage and some other facilities, but fairly minor compared to those two particular locations.
Let's take each of these individually, and we'll start with the Nauset Light Beach. As you said, it's now 3 years in a row, I think you said, and before that it was every couple of years. It was every 3 years or so, right? So it seems to be obviously that we're in a pattern of weather here that's taking out those stairs. So is there some type of long-range thought or about how do we not have to go through this every single season? Is there maybe some technology that's being looked at in terms of pulling the stairs up in the winter? Talk to me about that. What's happening in that area?
Well, frankly, even years ago, they talked about retractable stairs as an idea. But frankly, in those days, if we only had to replace it about every 4 years and we could do it in-house and, put together some 2x4s and we had stairs, it made still the most sense. We call that expendable construction. However, these days, the stairs that we build are pretty substantial. We have a large volume of visitors. We take a look at the standards a little bit differently with safety. And once you go through all the compliance and the contracting costs, they're now very expensive to actually install. So now the turn has changed a little bit, and we're taking a look at a retractable stair program as a possibility. The problem with that, both then and facing us, is that it's not just a case of the stairs disappearing, but for instance, this year, right where the stairs are located, we lost about 18 feet of the bluff. So if you put in a substantial base for retractable stairs and you pull up the stairs in the fall and you still have 3 to 18 feet of bluff eroded away, well, that's going to erode the structure that you have to use for the retractable stairs. The good news is that the National Park Service is particularly interested in us pursuing this as a concept because there are other places in the country where we might need this. So we've been working our regional office to get funding to move ahead with that. So that's on track. In the meantime, we did get the funding to put in the same stairs that we've had the last couple of years. Unfortunately, there's a high expectation that they'll go away next season as well. Besides the stairs as retractable, for those of you that are Nauset Light Beach fans, you know that the 1960s bath facilities are not too far away from the bluff now. So we have to develop a plan that would actually move them all the way back to the Ocean View Drive roadside of the parking lot, and that would give us a number of more years before we'd have to think about the next step after that.
The bottom line is that you really can't fight Mother Nature. You may be able to, come up with some solutions or short-term solutions, but at the end of the day, you're going to continue to see that pushback.
Well, basically, it's adapting, and it's basically trying to put in facilities that'll have the best long-term chances of sustainability over time. We're very excited several years ago when we received the funding for the new bathhouse up at Herring Cove Beach. You and I were just talking about that. I believe that has something like a 50-year lifespan. I think it's a good use of public money. Well, what does 50 years mean? Well, what it means is we pulled back the facility from where the one was built originally in the 1950s. It was raised above the storm surge of what we predict tides would be. And it's modular in that there's about 4 or 5 different structures out there that at some point, say in 20 years from now, the estimates were off and erosion is very severe. Well, the manager at that point can have it dismantled and relocated elsewhere on the property. And because our wastewater was hooked up to the Provincetown wastewater treatment plant, then we don't have to worry about a fixed septic system. We'd be able to actually relocate with the new facility at the time. So similarly, when we take a look at Nauset Light Beach, we want to move it back so that it'll have the longest opportunity for use of taxpayers' money for a lifespan over time. But there'll certainly come a time where even the parking lot and everything else has to be looked at differently. And we've been working with Volpe and with the town on what some future long-term opportunities might be if erosion keeps going at this pace.
There's been a lot of change up there. I remember when they moved the Nauset Lighthouse, if you will. So there's always erosion happening there on the backside.
Well, lighthouses are kind of dynamic things. I mean, the lighthouse is at the location of Nauset Light now. At one point it was the Three Sisters, which we have saved, and people can visit those a little bit down Cable Road. And then that particular tower that's there now, people may not know that that's actually the second tower that was located down in Chatham. So Chatham at one point had 2 lights, Nauset had 3 lights, and Highland Light was a single light. So as mariners were off the course, that's how they'd be able to reconcile with their charts. Well, as the technology changed and rotating lenses and the Fresnel lens, which really had a long reach, were put in place, then the redundancy of multiple towers or single towers wasn't necessary because the light pattern would actually give the signal. But you're right, where that tower was located about 20 years ago no longer exists because that part of the bluff is actually already eroded.
I remember the day they moved it. I was there covering it.
Were you? Great.
That's how long ago it was.
One of the things that's kind of exciting to me is that at a certain time at low tide in the winter, at the winter beach, you can actually see the ring of a former foundation of one of the previous lights actually turns up in the surf. I actually saw that about a month ago.
Similar to what you see sometimes up at the Marconi site when you see the remnants of the tower bases, et cetera, up at Marconi.
Absolutely. Several years ago I saw it. I couldn't believe it, but there was 2 exact squares of brick down in the intertidal zone. And the one foundation looked like it had been laid by masons that week. It was in such good condition. The other one was pretty disrupted. But I thought what was fascinating was the distance between them was the same. So all I can think of is that they slipped down the bluff together, and they matched as they stayed in the sand, and they show up every once in a while.
Guillermo Marconi had the whole thing planned out right from the beginning.
Well, I'm married to an Italian, so those Italians take a lot of credit.
So in terms of the stairs at Nauset Light, by June, you think, hopefully, early June for the stairs at Nauset Light Beach? That's
correct. That's the plan at this point.
All right, let's head up a little further, and as you're just joining us today on the Sunday Journal, we're actually coming to you from Provincetown. We're sitting here inside the Province Lands Visitor Center. It's a beautiful place. If you haven't been up here, we'll talk a little bit more about what's in here in a moment. But for a couple of years now, George, as well, the portion of the parking lot at the Herring Cove Beach has just been pounded by the storms. And we were up there just a few moments ago before we came here, and if you're listening to us now, you'll be able to see pictures of the erosion at CapeCod.com. We're going to be posting pictures of that erosion for you to go along with our radio story. But it was another winter of a real pounding and a loss of a lot of the parking lot down there.
That's right. That particular location was originally designed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when that was put in as what they called the new beach at that point in the 1950s and even earlier. There was a tour road that actually went along the beach. Later on in the 1950s, the state actually came in and built a state beach with a beach facility. That was the one that was just taken down a couple years ago. And then they also did up at Pilgrim Springs. They actually had a state park facility up there. When the National Seashore was created in 1961, and then as properties were brought in later in the 60s, the state turned over all of these properties, including the province lands, to the federal government to be part of the National Seashore. Well, the National Seashore in the 1960s, the staff just obviously reinforced what was there already, and reinforced by continuing to bolster up the revetment that's there, bolster up the parking lot, which originally had been the old tour road, and obviously tried to repair the bathhouse over time. Well, it's been a while since that was all put in, and we've had sea level rise, and we've had changes in storm conditions. And even though that area certainly has been repaired in the past, the severe devastation that we've seen in the last number of years is really unprecedented in everybody's memory that's been around the seashore. So large swaths of the revetment have actually been washed out. A lot of the material behind it has been decimated, and what you saw today, Matt, was only basically half the height of what we saw in January, February, when the first storm damage actually happened. So it was really quite deep, and it was quite severe. So we know that that design and that location has seen its day. We've been successful the last number of years where we've actually received funding from the National Park Service on an emergency basis to repair it in kind. But as the Park Service tells me, well, if it happens every year, it's no longer an emergency. So, Price, what are you going to do? You ought to take it either out of your base budget or you ought to make some accommodations. Well, fortunately, we have been receiving the funds, and it will be repaired again. I don't actually have a timeline for that this year. We're still in the contracting process to make that happen. But as you are aware, and I hope many of your listeners know, a couple of years ago we actually embarked on a process with the Advisory Commission. The Advisory Commission formed a subcommittee including people from Provincetown, and we came up with a new design that's I think a lot of people are enthusiastic about, where we would actually pull the entire parking lot back about 125 feet. We would raise it 15 feet, and people would still be able to park there, and you'd still be able to look out at the water. You'd have a much wider beach. And what that would do is that would allow for the natural sand transfer over time. Right now, that revetment is preventing that from actually happening. And according to the coastal geologists that I work with, Graham Geis and others from the Center for Coastal Studies, that really creates an unnatural system. So if we can have a natural system reinstalled, or at least as far as that goes, remove the macadam and let nature take its course, we believe it'll be a much more adaptable and sustainable facility. I'd like to think that would also have a 50-year lifespan, and that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. A lot of people say, well, the Seashore celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2011, and that was terrific, and obviously every season's terrific, but as the manager, I'm looking at the next 50 years because we're supposed to preserve these resources and allow them for visitor use for perpetuity and for future generations, and that's what we're focused on.
We really learned a lot over the years here in the coastal area about what to do with erosion. I guess you could almost call what you have at Herring Cove as, I think it's sometimes referred to as hard armoring or arboring the seashore, as opposed to maybe a softer type of protection, if you will, against erosion.
Right. A lot of people think of revetments as being the large boulders where you would have a revetment, especially at a breakwater or at a groin where the boulders would go out. What the state initially did, and the Park Service is continuing to maintain, is this asphalt or macadam actual revetment. So for those of you that haven't been there, think of the parking lot top, but the parking lot basically extends to basically a dam which goes down the face of the sand into the ground itself. itself into the beach. And that's the area that we're talking about that's been really pulled away by the wave action.
So the good news is, especially for Herring Cove, because it is, I think you've told me before, one of the most popular beaches in the Cape Cod National Seashore.
That's right.
And it's a great beach in a couple of ways. One, you can actually pull right up to the edge of the beach with your vehicle. You can see an amazing sunset because the beach faces mostly to the west. The parking lot does. And it's probably the only place I know of that you can pull your car up and watch whales.
Well, that's the thing. I've got to tell you, when I've spoken to other planners in the National Park Service, especially those from Denver's and other places, obviously we have seashores and we have spectacular areas in the national park system all over the country. And they say, well, maybe the people up there have been spoiled that they have this parking right there. And is that value that important? And I've said to them, absolutely, because as you just say, you can actually park there, you can watch the sunset. I myself have counted 10 whales right off of Herring Cove Beach since I've been here. Now, that only happened once. Other times it's just one or two. But that opportunity to actually have that visual, I think, is very important. And I believe it's an accessible piece. There are a lot of people, especially baby boomers my age, between the knees and the hips and everything else, walking over sand dunes is something that gets to be problematic. So to actually have that experience when they can get that close, especially to see the whales, I think is something that this seashore ought to maintain. We've been maintaining it since 1961, and I think we ought to be maintaining it into the future.
All right, so the good news is that's being repaired. Nauset Light stairs are being repaired. We've got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, George, as we're speaking to you, George Price, Superintendent, with the Cape Cod National Seashore. We're here in the Providence Lands Visitor Center. Anything new in here this summer, this season that we're going to be looking at? What's in here that people should think about stopping in and seeing while they're down here in Provincetown?
Well, if you haven't been to the Providence Lands Visitor Center, it is really terrific. It's a gem in that we've got the deck both at the level that you come in where the visitor center actually is located, and then the second deck up above. Again, a great place to watch the whales, Matt, when they're out here, especially when the humpbacks are there. Basically look for the birds or look for the whale boats, and there's probably going to be a spout or two. I know it was exciting for me to bring my children up here when they were young. As far as what's new, it's mostly been cleaned up. Literally, this is new carpet that just went down 2 weeks ago before the place was open, and we painted it up and we spruced it up. We still have a ways to go as far as new exhibits. We're in the initial stages of revamping the exhibits, and our bookstore partners, Eastern National, have done a wonderful job actually with their displays and the products that they actually have that visitors can take a look at. I'm looking across over your shoulder, and Richard Louv, who is an author that I really admire, has a couple of books we have for sale. One's called Last Child in the Woods, and the other's called The Nature Principle. And this actually talks about the benefits of being in the outdoors, both for young children as they're growing up, people like us, Matt, especially to go out and get some exercise, and others have the opportunity to go out. And I think I wrote an article in our park newspaper. I said national parks, good for the body and the soul, and been inspired by his writings on some of those ideas.
Well, George, we look forward to a great summer season up here at the National Seashore. Thanks for allowing us to come up here and spend some time here in the Visitor Center in Provincetown and to see some of that damage up close and personal, which is all going to get repaired, which is good news. And we'll see you up here again during the summer, George. And thanks so much for being with me today.
Matt, I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for being with me today on the Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.